Today's scripture today is 1 Peter 5 and verses 5 through 10. In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Cast all your anxiety to him, because he cares for you. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hands, that he may lift you up in time. Word of God for the people of God.
Paradox this time. So, if I asked all of you, and don't answer this because this would be unethical, but if I asked all of you, in the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge? How many days have you felt fidgety or restless over the last 2 weeks and been bothered by that? How many days have you had trouble relaxing? How many days have you felt like you couldn't stop or control worrying? How many days have you worried too much about different things? How many of those days in the last 2 weeks have you had difficulty concentrating on things like trying to read, finding yourself getting lost? And how many of those days out of the last 2 weeks would you say you felt almost afraid, like something bad was going to happen either today or tomorrow or in the near future? Those questions are used by entry-level caseworkers, therapists, nurses to screen for anxiety disorder. But it is an entry-level assessment. And we conclude from those questions, depending on how you answer, oh, you have an anxiety disorder. That is not the intention of these kinds of instruments. And so if I were to assess myself and answer those questions, over the last 2 weeks, have I struggled with all of these things? Well, I just started a new job. And at that new job, I'm learning all kinds of new things. So in the last 2 weeks, have I felt nervous, anxious, or on edge? Yeah, I'm feeling some pressure. Have I felt worried about things? Definitely. I'm figuring out the logistics of a new place of work. And so when we take something like this assessment and we conclude that the person has a disorder, rather than that they're experiencing some symptoms that might be consistent, we kind of do a disservice, but that's something that's happening. And part of the reason that it's happening is that as a culture, we have decided to pathologize pain. So what I hope to encourage today is that we can kind of move past this idea that we have to treat this as a medical thing, where you're going to go in, you're going to answer 7 simple questions. You're going to tell your nurse, yeah, I've been struggling with this and this and this. And they're going to say, oh, you have the physical symptoms of anxiety, so you should start taking Buspar 3 times a day. Or you're worrying a lot, so I'm just going to put you on an SSRI. Well, maybe we need a little bit more time to think about these kinds of things. So I'm not going to tell you not to do that, but what I am hoping to encourage you is to think a little bit differently about your relationship to this concept of anxiety. So I'm going to try to connect some pieces of history here in a way that may or may not actually make sense, because some of you have been alive a lot longer than I have. But when I look at pictures from the 60s or 70s, or when I read old stories, I notice 2 things. One, there weren't a lot of people out of shape. And 2, there weren't a lot of people reported as having mental health problems. In fact, it was so rare that if someone had them, everyone in town would kind of point to that person. Or they were like the family shame, if you read some of these old stories. They would say, we kept them away. Or she was troubled, had melancholia, sometimes they would call it. And that's that sort of person that can't get out of bed to take care of their needs. And so that's a pretty extreme thing to be. But if you weren't in that extreme position, the world didn't look at you as if you had a problem, even if you were dealing with some internal anxiety. Now, there's a number of things that have changed over the last several decades, and one of those is kids used to have to go to gym. And when they went to gym class, the teacher wouldn't let them sit out of gym class. And so there was a little bit of regulation there. The other thing that's happened, for better, some ways for better, and some ways for worse, is the affordability of food alternatives. And I'm intentionally calling them food alternatives because some of them have not turned out to be so good for us. And so as we've seen a correlation in the rise of childhood obesity and in obesity in the general population, we've also seen a correlation between that and the rise of mental health disorders. So part of what we have is a framing problem. The first thing that happened when I woke up today, as a horrible therapist, I did something I would never tell my patients to do. In fact, I would tell them not to do this. I checked my phone, and I started doing the scrolling thing. And the first article that popped up for me was an article on a food study that was recently published in a journal of neuroscience. And this was this morning, okay? I opened it, and what it said was, when we eat a high-fat diet of processed foods, we are more likely to experience not only heart problems, but in fact, they found increased sensitivity to olfactory disturbance. What does that mean? Well, it just means you are going to be more averse to bad smells, and you notice them faster. Why is that important? Because aversion is the role of the center of your brain that detects threats, fear. It's called the amygdala. And so when you eat a high-fat diet of processed foods, you increase the activation of your amygdala. And in addition to that, because memory is involved with anxiety, it suppresses the memory center so that the amygdala, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but